동물 경험 현장에 좀 가르쳐 보. 경험 성주 상지 지상나 되는 지 계획 자와 나랑 송지 경험 마서고 봐. 계획 자와 영문 로와 세 문로와 공부 패러와에서 경험 성주 상지 지 마제나 되게 개와 특성아 랭기 컴네 되게 다 공부와 해서 대인들 경험에 현장 가르쳐 보.
First of all, it is once again necessary that we check our motivation, the underlying force, the underlying attitude why we're here in the first place. And we are well advised to know that the best of possible motivations would of course be such an attitude which allows us to bring about the best possible benefit for all beings, not a single one excluded, by way of being here. We should not be here simply to gain benefit for ourselves, to gain happiness or joy or the causes thereof for ourselves, but through the course of these instructions which we receive here, we should strive to bring about the greatest possible welfare for all beings. Now, why is it so important to have such an attitude? It is so important because if we should practice virtue for the sake of others without such an attitude, then the positive result thereof will last only a very short time and will be exhausted very quickly. If, however, we practice virtue for the sake of others with this great attitude of the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta, then the benefit will be great and the benefit that we bring about for ourselves and others will be lasting. Now, from among the instructions on the 7 points of mind training, we have reached the final, the 7th point. And from among the explanations that are given concerning the 7th point, now Chakava Yeshe Dorje, the author of the original teaching itself, continues to say, employ the 3 main causes. With these words, he means to say that there are 3 causes or conditions that we should make good use of. The very first one is to have met a proper and authentic teacher. If we were not able to meet such a teacher from whom to receive such instructions, then our Dharma practice would be, from the outset, beset with difficulties and problems. Therefore, having met a proper teacher, having met an authentic teacher, make good use of this teacher so as to derive the most benefit from the beneficial presence of the teacher. Then, the second point is that one's own state of mind should be in such a way as to enable us to employ the Dharma instructions, to practice the Dharma, to understand the Dharma in every possible situation in the proper way, so as to make the very best use of whatever Dharma we have learned and practiced. And the third point of these 3 is to make use of the proper outer conditions. We need food, we need clothing, we need a place to stay, for instance, and in particular, if we were to practice in seclusion, if we were to practice a retreat. So having brought these conditions together, we should also make good use of them. If that is the case, if we have these 3 causes or these 3 conditions, and if we're able to truly make good use of them, then it says, or Chakava Yeshe Dorje says, then this is a cause for great rejoicing.
Tala Gambe, Gamkin, so I do, Yanda, me, some young the GB, Tendre, Nimbo, who I and so on. Pendawa Tenate, Tatangaroto, then Tukono and those something, Makashi, and the Tukona pay me, move by Chimbo, Yamina, move by Chimboji, and the Makashindo. I don't know Tukona to move by your day, and I'm so thinking the chant days as Drigamundo. They say Kalika want to tell something Mandos. They ended any Mangashi Jalan, Pejote, Yori, Yenayo, some Drovalan to break to say your Mari Muba, Tatanica, your Mari. Then there comes Yena, then Muba Yepek, man, so thinking the Kanga Yoga, Tera, the Maran, the Age Terra, she and them, Ropan, China, Jindor, China. I think a young lady gave it our young do, I don't want to talk with it. And then Malari because someone knowing they gave it our young to talk with it.
Regarding these points, there is a quote by Milarepa which roughly says, "The one training himself among rocks and mountains, and the other one giving generous support. When these two come together, it is a joyful and auspicious connection. However, of essential importance is dedication." This says very much the same as we have heard before. For instance, there might be such people who have the great wish at the bottom of their hearts to truly practice, maybe even to go into retreat in mountain wildernesses and caves or retreat huts or whatever, take themselves out of the world and practice in seclusion in a very intensive way, yet they lack the means to do so. Doing so, of course, one has to support oneself in some such way. Some of practitioners who have the wish to do so do not have the means to support them. Therefore, it is difficult for them to practice in this way. Then there might be other people who have a general interest in the Dharma and have faith in the Dharma, yet have no such intention to go into retreat themselves, to go into mountain caves, into rocky caves or mountain wildernesses to practice there. Yet they have the financial means that they could do so. Now, if these two would come together in such a way as that the one with the means would support the one without the means, in that way a very auspicious connection would come together, because both of them would greatly benefit in the very same way from this connection. The benefactor, the sponsor, would benefit greatly because he or she makes it possible for a practitioner to go into seclusion, into retreat, and practice intensively, and the practitioner himself or herself would bring about great benefit through the practice that he or she is unable to do because of the kindness of the benefactor. And so in this way, both bring about the necessary means, both accumulate the necessary merit, which will propel both of them forward towards the goal of the awakening of Buddhahood itself. And that benefit, that merit that is being accumulated by both of them, by the one through doing his or her practice and by the other through supporting the practitioner, that of course is yet again something that can be dedicated for the sake of beings, so as to make that benefit a means of bringing about welfare and joy and happiness for all. If we should find ourselves in a position to have truly brought together these main three causes, the authentic teacher, a mind that is pliable enough to take up the practice and the study of Dharma, and the outer conditions of food, housing, clothing, etc., then in keeping with the general instructions of mind training, we should give rise to the wish that all beings, not a single one excluded, may themselves also be fortunate enough to have such conditions. In this way, we should make this a cause of our concern for beings, where in particular we meet beings who lack these conditions, any one of these or all of them for that matter, that should give rise to kindness and compassion from the bottom of our hearts for these beings which are not, which have not yet brought such conditions together. So in this way, we should then, again, in keeping with the instructions of mind training, make the wish or the aspiration from the bottom of our hearts that all these adverse, negative circumstances from which other beings possibly suffer, that they may all come to ripen within ourselves, so that all these other beings may become free of them. Chagawayeshandoji continues to say, be free of the three types of deterioration. So three things there are which we should not allow to deteriorate. The first of them is our connection with our precious teacher, with that authentic teacher, which is one of the predominant root causes in the first place. If we have met such a teacher, if we have received instruction from such a teacher, that connection, that relationship which we have with the teacher is of greatest importance. So we should not allow ourselves in any which way to let that relationship deteriorate, to have it worsen in any which way. The second deterioration that is to be avoided is the practice of mind training and upholding the ideas and ideals of mind training as a whole. Whatever mind training, whatever we practice in the course of mind training, whatever we give rise to in the course of this awakened heart, the bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude, our willingness to take the suffering of others upon ourselves, and our willingness to give the joy and the causes of our joy away to others. That is the second point, the second thing that we should not allow to deteriorate or worsen. And then third, there are all the three types of commitments that one could possibly take upon oneself. All the three types of vows, like that, those of individual liberation, or bodhisattva resolve, or the Vajrayana vows, etc. Whatever commitments there are that one might keep, one should not allow them to be breached, to be damaged, to deteriorate. So these are the three deteriorations: the relationship with the Lama, the bodhisattva resolve, and one's own personal commitments, which one should be free of, the deterioration of which one should be free of.
And Drime song Lembar Chakawari. Then Drime song to daughter Aronjo. Lugagoni Dipamegua, some Magagoni Dipamegua, yet Yegagoni Dipamega, some Yora. He dipesotam dite, two daughter, Panto Parsis. Then he gave it our Tedang, combating Lugi Giava. Okay, Giava, Age Giava, take down Java Mapper, Damber Sao, the Tati, 2,000 Aronton, the Pada Pang, Giava to drip, then our Google.
Furthermore, Chagawayeshandoji says, be endowed with the three kinds of freedom. What this means is that we should be free of the shortcomings and downfalls of body, speech, and mind. Altogether, these are usually known as the 10 non-virtuous actions, the 3 non-virtuous actions of body, the 4 non-virtuous actions of speech, and again the 3 non-virtuous actions of our minds. Of these 3, we should be free. We should free ourselves, and of course, that means that we should exchange these to the best of our ability with the 10 virtuous actions. Exchange the non-virtue of body, speech, and mind with the virtuous actions of body, speech, mind, and in this way free yourselves of the negative influence of non-virtue.
누속에 생긴 통지라 나랑게 다른 로종라 소바 감투사리티 샤속에 생긴 통지 나랑 감투사 말해서 엔지마시 이 소리마바 생긴 통지라 된다와 로종 감고에서.
Again, another quote by Chakavaya Dorje, this time 2 lines, in which he says, "Free from being partial in any direction whatsoever. Train yourself in practicing in an all-pervasive way, or being all-pervasive. This means to say that we should not keep up any kind of partiality. For instance, that we might think, well, if I practice in such a way, I in particular take beings and people in the western region of this world into account, but those in the eastern region I just don't care, or any other combination thereof. We should be free of any partiality whatsoever and take all of these beings into account, no matter where they are, no matter who or what they might be, so that all of these beings in an all-pervasive way can benefit from our own practice of mind training to the best possible extent." We may occasionally find ourselves in a situation in which we encounter people whom we intensely dislike. We might intensely dislike them because they have caused us any kind of harm in the past, or at least we might think so. So that might give rise to the idea of, well, if ever in the future I should be in a position to bring you any benefit, to help you in any way, well, then I will certainly refrain from doing so. If one were to think in this way, this would be in direct contradiction to one's bodhisattva resolve. It would be a complete breach of one's bodhisattva resolve or bodhisattva commitment. Well, we, all of us being ordinary beings, of course we find ourselves under the influence of emotional defilements, obscurations, etc., and whatever combination thereof. So therefore it is not an altogether surprising thing that such thoughts, such reactions should occasionally occur. That in itself doesn't do much damage. However, if we should find it within ourselves at such a time when such thoughts, such ideas appear in our minds, to recognize them for what they are and to immediately abstain from acting in any which way upon such thoughts or spinning these thoughts any further, but to attached to that thought, that resolve, well, here is that thought, but even such persons I will endeavor to bring benefit to in the future. And this way we could counteract the negative influence of such an erroneous thought and even turn it into something good. So therefore this kind of attitude, to keep it, to allow such an attitude to pop up in the first place and to even act upon it, that would be a serious breach of the Bodhisattva resolve. But if we recognize it for what it is and mend our ways accordingly, then no great damage is done. I forgot to say before, if one were to exclude even a single being on the basis of thinking that such a being had done us any harm in the past and therefore we should refrain from offering help if we are in such a position, that just to exclude that single being would breach, would seriously damage our bodhisattva resolve. Now we might also find ourselves in other situations, particularly where the outer elements of the world cause us trouble. We might find ourselves in such situations where we might encounter floods, heavy rainfalls, earthquakes, fires, or whatever it might be. If that is the case, then what point would there be to become upset about it? All of such experiences of such problems with the elements, etc., all experiences for that matter, are nothing else but the expression of nothing else but the result of our own doing in the past. We ourselves have caused such negative experiences which we might make here and there, and there is no one else whatsoever who has any fault in our experiencing such negative things. Therefore, instead of becoming upset about it, we might again make these experiences a cause to be brought onto the past, to recognize them as having been caused by ourselves, and not to give rise in such cases to negative feelings or emotions or even anger about these.
틀면 뭐 걸 틀까지 가보자.
독실되네.
그뭐 자기도 쌤하고도 그래 안 좋아해도.
Particularly in Tibet, the farmers constantly live with one very strong fear. In many of the high pastures of Tibet, it is the case that only one harvest can be brought in the year. Therefore, good weather conditions during the harvest periods are essential. Now, occasionally it happens when in autumn, when the harvest is due, all of a sudden a big thunderstorm comes along its way, and there's heavy rainfall, and there will be heavy hail, and the hail in many reaches of Tibet is of such a strong nature that the entire harvest could be destroyed in just a few instants, which of course would spell disaster for the farmers who have hoped to bring in that harvest in order to stock up for the winter, etc., so they have foodstuffs available. Then it is a tradition in Tibet, in many regions, that in order to prevent such hailstorms, one employs a practitioner, a yogin who one deems to be to have gained certain powers in order to avert such hailstorms. Such yogis for hire, as one could call them, who are then brought into a particular region in order to keep it hail-free for the period of the harvest. And Rinpoche says there are predominantly two different types. There is the one type that then sits down somewhere overlooking the fields that he's supposed to be protecting, and he immerses himself in meditative concentration in a very peaceful manner, smiling benignly, and if there should be any adverse weather circumstances, then usually if that yogin truly has the powers that people think of him, then the weather will clear up, the harvest can be brought in, and no damage will be done. Then there is another type who resorts to rather more wrathful means. They make a great outward show with lots of ringing and rattling and trumpet blowing and many wrathful gestures and wrathful mantras, so that the elements are actually rather more scared away than anything else. Rinpoche says the very much preferable way to deal with such situations is definitely the peaceful way, which is in accord with mind training, as we have heard about it. So therefore, someone who would rather more resort to wrathful means definitely shows himself to be someone who has not yet really grasped the meaning of mind training. But yet there is a third type of yogin, which definitely is the very worst of all of them. That is the type who first produces such adverse weather, in order to then be employed by the villagers to avert the bad weather that he has produced in the first place, in order to gain money, in order to gain fame. So such a person would be an utterly shameful person. Such a person would definitely be an example of someone who has absolutely misunderstood, absolutely not understood any of the points of mind training whatsoever.
Tani zo mungtongwa tani Tenga vekli tani yungbo yorawa benda ngaron kambanga shi nona nyindudu tani kambakali goche yungenda tek dana se yomari tani yang kambanon kamba jene se ungenda wo tek dana yomari Tengawa tela yungbo mama yin zore Tengawa yena yung yungbo mama yin de jena Zogda mevare maduke, then semkingi. Korongaron to Kiwa Toma Meva, Chinese drinking shot already. They end up Koron, Melon Robachella, then Koron Tata Mama in the Zola Swan. Tendawa Sonoto, Telaten, Tendawa Yonayo, then somebody Ninja Gum. Then Jenny's like Zohan, then Tendawa Tendila, then Sonju Sangre, Chabakin to do it.
And then there might be such situations in which we believe in the influence of spirits or demonic forces. For instance, if we would spend the night, let's say, in an old building or possibly in an empty building, there we are on a mattress trying to sleep away, but all of a sudden there's the sound of a creaking door. And we are completely thunderstruck and shocked and full of panic. Nevertheless, we get a little bit of our courage that is left together and we go and have a look. There is no one. So back to bed, try to sleep again. And all of a sudden, there are other sounds. Sounds as if someone is walking, someone is coming up or walking up the stairs. Yet again, we grab a torch, have a look, no one there. So in such cases, it might be that we might encounter the influence of such beings that have no particular body. They are very ordinary beings, very ordinary, just they lack a body, which is a result of their having committed negativity, evil deeds, or having made the wrong types of aspirations in previous lifetimes. Far from just panicking and locking ourselves in and wishing that a potentially evil demonic force away, we should give rise to compassion, to kindness to such a being. You could imagine that such a being that roams around without a body is not the happiest of beings. Therefore, that in turn gives us cause to give rise to compassion. And there again, in this particular case, we could train ourselves in exchanging our happiness for the suffering of this being and trying to help this type of being along.
I did and it's a sorry maybe sending and mamma last of all and Lojong someone in gone. The cards on say mine. Ning Taba, Nitan Kella, somebody in Lojong gone. Singing young Sawa Jesus.
Now, no matter what circumstance we might find ourselves in, whether we find ourselves confronted with people who seemingly wish us ill, who address us in negative ways, who cause us harm or distress, or whether we find ourselves in adverse conditions where the outer elements are concerned, or whether or not we find ourselves under the influence of what we believe to be non-human forces, demons, spirits, or whatever. All of these situations should be cause for us to give rise to kindness and to compassion, and to take the suffering of all of these beings who cause us distress in any which way into account, exchange ourselves for them, and not bear them any ill will in any way whatsoever. So all of these occasions should give us occasion to practice that which we are taught in the course of mind training, to give rise to the enlightened attitude, to give rise to bodhicitta from the bottom of our hearts. And all situations, in an ideal case scenario, we should be able to act in such a way.
Nara Dayona, then a lot of this gone to Calicover. And Marana, Nepek, Dick Jumbo last of the public. They are gone carried years. Then Naranga Pin Tony, who would you never say, and it is again gone carried years. And then rang and then down to Nara, then a time, keep buying Narande, and then that's a man.
Shagama Yeshidoji continues to say, at all times train yourself in difficult situations or in difficult circumstances. Such situations might be exactly the situations in which we find ourselves confronted with people who apparently wish us harm, whom we consider to be of evil nature, who want to harm us, who want to bring distress and any such problems upon ourselves, even though we might have acted in positive ways towards them. Instead of being thankful for whatever good we have done for them, they repay us in harsh ways, they repay us in negative ways. In such situations, it is of course not very easy to maintain a friendly, a loving, a kind demeanor, but exactly that is what is to be trained in. Then we might find ourselves under such situations where we think that generally there are harm bringers, obstacle makers of whatever nature that causes distress. And again, our temper might flare up and we might act in angry and negative ways, which is of course not what we should be doing. Also in such situations we should train ourselves in such a way as to remain friendly, as to remain kind and compassionate. In this way, there are all sorts of difficult situations of this particular type, which become a direct object of our training in the ideas and ideals of mind training. Whenever such situations occur, in which we might find ourselves addressed in the wrong way, in which we might find ourselves harmed by others, really, if that might truly be the case, or if we might just imagine so. In these cases, we should train that which we have learned in the course of mind training. Rinpoche continues to say that particularly towards one's teachers and also one's parents, one should not allow oneself to bring about a negative state of mind, a negative mood, an aggressive mood of any sort whatsoever. On top of that, there's a whole long list of other situations, people that we might be in competition with, or people that might not be particularly beneficial, even though they should be, etc. In all of these situations, we should not give rise to anger, to impatience, but strive to the best of our ability to remain kind, to remain friendly, to remain compassionate. Time for questions.